Hello, class, and welcome to week 14. We're getting really close to the end of the semester, and I know those of you who are graduating are counting the days, if not the minutes, until we get to that point. But anyway, again, before I get started, I'd like to again just say that I do hope that you and your families are doing well in this pandemic, and that you will continue to do well. It's a very difficult situation that we're all dealing with, and I hope everybody is well. We're going to talk today about one of the two topics that was assigned for week 14. The closing starts at the beginning in the chapter on closing. I decided to indicate to you two different sections of that, just two sections, and I think that pretty well summarizes the idea of closing. But closing starts at the beginning is our first topic for today, and there is the very familiar 7 steps of the selling process, with closing being down there at number 6. I like to remind you that although these look like separate and distinct steps, there's a great portion of that right there in the middle, from the approach to the presentation to handling objections and handling the closing. For sure, that's really one major section. Follow-up comes after a successful close, of course. But I think sections 3, 4, 5, and 6 really are the meat and potatoes of this whole topic about talking about the selling process. Closing a sale. I think sometimes we may get the impression that's all this whole process is about, and that if we should gear everything about the selling process on the close. And of course, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to solve a problem for the customer. We're trying to give them the product or services that they need, and hopefully they'll solve their problem with the product or service that we sell. But it's actually the close is actually an ongoing series of events that take place throughout the process. It is, I think, better to think of that and think about how it goes back to the first steps with prospecting and qualifying the prospect. I think all these things are included and should be kind of considered together. Thinking about linking the prospecting phase of the selling process to the closing sale. One way to look at it is to say, if you as a salesperson have identified the right prospects, and did a really good job in doing the background work and picking the prospects who can really use your product, then the closing will be a lot easier. Put that another way, if we're really not sure, and sometimes you're not sure, sometimes with a lot of research you're still not sure who are the customers that can benefit from your product or service, and who are those that can't. But I think that fit between what we're trying to do and who needs our product is kind of the key to this. The close actually starts at the beginning of the selling process if we've actually been able to identify those people who need our product or service. There is a discussion in the textbook, the trial close versus the close, and it's kind of a smaller section, but I think it's good information. That there is a big difference between the trial close and the close. A trial close is toward the end of the presentation and part of the part, and it may be with some customers it may be more in the middle of the presentation. But the idea is to ask a question of the customer to get some direction. It might be where to get direction to go in the rest of the presentation, and if you have the right direction, that might lead you to a successful close, which is the sale of your product or service. Thinking back to the dental office example of a couple of weeks ago, We talked about a software product in a small dental office. And along with that product, there may have been some extras, some things like some local training. And so of where we can, sellers of software products, have an option of selling the software or of selling the software plus some local training. In other words, if I'm the seller, I'm telling you, the buyer, that our company will train your people on how to use on how to use our software product. So knowing that that's part of the package, a trial close is somewhere through the discussion, through the presentation, is to ask the customer, how do you feel about the local training option? They may not have thought a lot about the training versus buying the training or getting, maybe they're thinking that maybe you're going to provide that, you as a salesperson's company will provide that free. But their reaction, it'll give you a chance to see, are they still interested in what I'm doing here? Are they still interested in my presentation? Or is the customer just really waiting till this appointment is over and they can get back to work and I can go out the door and they don't have to think about our product anymore? So asking a trial close is a good way to find out their level of interest. Tone of voice, body language when you ask that question. If they think, oh, well, if it's a very positive kind of response to your question, whatever it is, it will give you some information. The trial close can provide quite a bit of information if you keep alert for that. A close is where you, rather than asking for an opinion, is to ask for a decision, such as, if I'm able to get the local training, can we make this deal happen? If I'm able to, if our company is able to provide that free of charge, along with your purchase of the software product, will you make this deal happen? In other words, will you buy the product? And one of the important points to keep in mind here is that the trial close can give you a lot of information about where the customer is kind of positioned with how they're relating to you, how they're relating to the company, how the customer salesperson relationship is developing. Whereas the close is asking for a decision. So you need to be careful there of not getting to that point too quick until you're ready to ask for that, because you don't want a no answer too quick. You don't want to bring that to an end. You don't want to bring the presentation to an end if you haven't really had an opportunity to address the needs of the customer. We can talk about what a close is and what a close is not. And clearly, it's not a high pressure exchange between a seller and a buyer, although probably a lot of people have that thought. If you've never been around salespeople or never thought much about the selling transaction, you may think that it's a high pressure exchange between a buyer and a seller. Maybe in certain industries, maybe you've been shopping with somebody or shopped for a car for yourself, or been with somebody shopping for a car, and there may have been a time when you thought maybe there was just a little bit too much pressure brought onto the customer by the seller, and you might have thought, well, maybe that was the close, and it may have been, and it may well have been, and sometimes that may have been an example of a salesperson who was too quick to ask for the close. It's not a time when the salesperson resorts to trickery or manipulation or unsavory tactics just to get the sale. That's not what the definition of a close is. A close, if you think about it, think of the presentation as being a professional conversation between the salesperson and the buyer. And it might, in the case of like the dental office, there were some other people there, so you could call that like the buyer committee, people that were there to give input to the dentist about the software. So think about this, but it is a conversation between the salesperson and the buyer or the buyer's committee. And so, and think about any kind of a conversation that you have on a day-to-day basis. It is one, that starts out that you meet somebody, you have a meet and greet time, which in a sales presentation, that's at the pre-presentation stage. And then you have your conversation. And then at some point you have there's some ending. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the end is you met your friend for lunch and the conversation is over because you're going back to work. That kind of that's kind of the close. It might be that sometimes it's sometimes you're with a person, and think of this as an example. If you're meeting your friend for lunch and your friend is interrupted by a phone call and they have to leave immediately, and then before you got to talk about everything and before you had a chance to to share some information or some news with your friend, that feeling. It's kind of that incomplete feeling. We didn't quite get the conversation ended. That's why we want the close to be a definite point, because when we're building a relationship with a customer, it may end in a sale, and it may not. But what we want to make sure of is if it doesn't end in a sale, we still want that person to be in our relationship group. They want to be one of our business contacts, if you will, one of our business friends, one of the people that we're talking to to become a customer. May not be a customer now, but maybe a customer later. We want to keep that relationship open. So the close serves that particular purpose. However it ends, we want that to be a pleasant ending to the process. Closing can consist of, they're described in a number of ways, as you know from reading up on that in your textbook. It can be, as we said, like the trial close, is asking exploratory questions to better understand the prospect's needs. It also gives you a chance to focus your efforts on helping prospects find solutions to their problems. And as you go, again, think back to this professional customer seller relationship, that it may be that it's not until you're getting close to, maybe it's not until you have a trial close that you get some piece of information that will help you even understand better what the needs are of the customer. Maybe in the research you did before you met with this customer, in preliminary discussions you had with the customer, maybe certain points didn't come out until the conversation during the sales presentation may have brought certain things to the surface that are now new pieces of information that have to do with finding a solution to their problems. Sometimes when there's this committee involved, as it was in the dental office, one of the people in the dentist's office, one of the employees there, might happen to think of something or give a story about something that happened to the current software package that they're using, and which would shine new information on the needs of a needs that needs to be addressed. Maybe something that you didn't anticipate, something that you weren't prepared for because you didn't know this question was going to come up, but now you're aware that there is a new need that you need to address. But anyway, you want to focus your efforts on helping the prospect find solutions to their problems. And it very well could be that we get to the end of the process, the close doesn't end, at least this close doesn't end in the selling of a product, but it may, in a sense, something may have happened there in the discussion that actually shines some new light on the needs of the customer and finding solutions to their problems. What you make sure you want to do is you close the conversation, bring that to an end, as you would, pretty much any kind of a conversation that you would have on the phone, on the telephone, or over lunch or in person some other way. Bring it to a successful conclusion, but leave it open. Leave open a possibility for further contacts with the customer. I think when is the best time to close? Some of the key points are that it's closing is ready. You're ready when the prospect displays some positive body language and some positive interactions. For example, the way they body language or answers to questions about the trial close. Certainly, when the prospect asks questions, it's a good indication that it's time to close, because they're in. You got them on board with the discussion. You're speaking their language. You're speaking their language. They're speaking your language. You have a meeting of the minds, and it's a time to move to the close. If they're not, if they're just waiting for you to leave and they really don't want to continue on it with the sales presentation, they won't ask questions. More than likely, there won't be any questions, because they don't want to make this presentation last any longer than it needs to. After you handle an objection is often a good time too, because that's a point to where you time yourself on this. It may be an objection that is a solution to a particular problem that the customer has that they didn't anticipate. You can tell by particularly by their body language. It also might be their words that they use or the tone of voice. But we're going by looking at this slide here that shows that some research studies say that as much as 55% of what we hear is from body language. Now, whether that's totally accurate in every particular case is not really the point I'm trying to make here. The point is that the words, tone of voice, and body language all go together in some way to communicate, and some customers are going to communicate better or more with words, or more with tone of voice, or more with body language. And so figure out however they communicate, get to know them, and by now you know them pretty well to determine how they give meaning, how they show meaning, whether it's through body language, tone of voice, or words. And so this will give you some indication of when it's time to close. If it's good signs, it might be if the feedback you're getting is, I don't know, I'm saying pretty negative. It's looking maybe not so negative. Maybe it's a lack of interest. Maybe it's maybe the customer is distracted. Okay, so let's assume you've had the appointment set up for a couple weeks to come in and make your presentation. What you don't know is perhaps in the 15 minutes before you walked in the door to make your presentation, that the customer got some piece of news, a phone call, somebody dropped in the office with some information that is distracting them, and they're just not really ready to pay attention to this. They're not really into this. You've got the product there. You're showing them the software on your laptop, or you've brought up demonstration software on their computer, and they're just not into it. They're just not really interested in it. You can then say, why don't we reschedule? This might be a time to do that kind of early in this closing process, because rather than getting to all the way through the conversation, all the way through the presentation to where the customer says, it's been a bad day, I can't make any decisions now. You don't need to get them to the decision point. If you see in advance that there isn't going to be a decision point today, you've had enough experience in dealing with people that you know what I'm talking about here. So kind of think of that when you're in a sales situation. Trust, no question about it. Trust is the number one ingredient when it comes to in business transactions. When one person is dealing with another person, a buyer with a seller, one company with another company, trust is often mentioned as the most influential factor in business-to-business prospects when making a buying decision. And there are so many important reasons why that's the case. In the B2B situation, the buyer is often in a case of buying a product that they will resell to their customers, or it might if they're a retail business. So they want to make sure that they're putting a lot of trust in you, that what you're selling to them is something they will be proud to sell to their customers and not have to make any apologies about it, not have to worry about it. So that trust is a really important factor there. The other one, the other point is that it's so often mentioned in buying decisions because it's a hard one to build into the 7 steps of selling. Building trust means you're doing what you say you will do, both before and after the sale. Well, before the sale, you and the customer may not have had very much interaction, so you haven't had any opportunities to show how trustworthy you are. They haven't had many opportunities to get to know you, and so what's very, very important here early on is there are small steps, and and I can mention a couple of them, that it's not necessarily going to be a firm, ironclad way for them to say, yes, we have trust between us. But it's starting out. Make sure that everything you do, doing what you say you will do, keeping your appointment, being on time. Probably many of these points are what you might call professional courtesy. And you've probably thought about this, and you maybe have some thoughts about it of your own, that sometimes if you're not being treated in a courteous manner by another person, that you might be more open to the fact is, well, what else is there about this person that's not, it's kind of unsavory? What else is it that where it might cause a worry for me if they're not, if they're not acting professionally in terms of respecting the appointment, making sure that anytime you're making an appointment with a person, to make sure you're there. When you say you're going to follow up, make sure you do. Those are small things, but without building toward trust, let's kind of talk about it that way, without building toward it, we will never get to the point where we will actually say we have developed it. Being very professional, being in manner, in tone of voice, being professional with talking to other people in the office, being professional and courteous to the person, the receptionist, or whoever you've had contact with in the office who makes the appointment for your customer. Start now. Why it's very important to have a good relationship from the very start with everybody who is involved with your customer. It also, I think it's also something else that's significant about the trust point that I like to mention, is that it's significant back at your home company. It's that you have built trust in the people there who work with you, who you work with, who supply you with the products, the people that work in the warehouse, the ones that can deliver the product for your customers, the ones that can maybe even do you a favor if you need, if a customer says, can I get the product a little faster than what your company normally ships? But, if you're able to, if you have trust with the company and certainly the management of the department that's able to provide that product, if you can build bridges with them to say, I'm not pressuring you, but if possible, can we get this customer's product to them a day or two early? So this is probably one, and there are probably many other points in the 7 steps of selling that we talk about as being important between a buyer and a seller, and that they're also important. Another would be communication skills, for example. We know you want to communicate well with with your customers. You also want to communicate well with the people who are in-house, inside the company that you're working with. That your reputation should be the same. It should be a good reputation both in the company and outside the company with your customers. There are types of closes, and I noticed that there are in different books and lists of these that I've seen over the years. Here's a list of 5 on this slide. Sometimes you see 3, sometimes you see 8. Obviously all very similar, but these are the ones that are mentioned in your textbook, and I think it's a good sampling. I think by the time we've talked about all of these, plus the one that follows these 5, which is a combination of 2 or more of these. I think you've pretty well covered any type of a part of the selling situation that you can call a close. The direct request close, the benefit summary close, the assumptive close, the alternative choice close, and the complement or vanity close. So the direct request is just going right out and asking the prospect for the order. When the time's appropriate and you feel it is, you might say, may I go ahead and write up this order as we discussed? That's when when the when came up and you saw now is the time. Another point, if I didn't really mention that enough in one of the past slides, I'll mention it now in the sense of oftentimes new salespeople find it hard to get to the close. They find everything else a lot easier than getting to the close, because you might say that as we're moving to the close, if you don't have a lot of experience, that you might start feeling the buildup of maybe anxiety or nervousness. You're wondering, well, now you're coming down to, this is where the rubber meets the road. Will I really sell the product? Will my sales manager, will the boss still believe in me, that I'm still learning the job? So sometimes there's a reluctance to move into the close, even when the signals have been clear that it's time to ask for it. But anyway, the direct request, ask the prospect for the order. Another one is the benefit summary close is to kind of wrap up the sales presentation by talking about the benefits or the service throughout the selling process. Now you can summarize them without being, without too much repeat. Hit the high points. This might be a time to fall back on what you've done in a lot of your weekly write-ups in this class, is that hit the bullet points very quickly. Say 4, 5, 6 words about each of 5 or 6 main points that you have talked about through the selling process. Just hit the highlights of the product or service, the benefits, the main ones. Not every single one, but kind of the main ones, especially those that pertain to the product or service that will solve the problem that the customer currently has. The assumptive close, it's a matter of making an assumption of sorts. Ask a question that leads the prospect to committing to the sale. So something like, shall we set you up on automatic billing, okay, for a product that lends itself to that? So you're kind of jumping in to a step past the asking for the sale. You're kind of assuming that they're going to say yes, and now you're assuming, well, there's different ways to buy the product or to pay for it. Can we set you up on automatic billing? Would be another way to get at that. The alternative choice close. Give the prospect a choice between two options, or maybe two or more options. This has come up in other discussions that we've had in our slide presentations this semester. It's that idea of giving, rather than pinning the buyer down, or the prospective buyer, without backing them into a corner with saying, can we write up the sale now? Is to give them a choice between two options that immediately will focus their attention on one option, comparing the two options, rather than trying to decide, do I buy the product, do I not buy the product? It's like, if you can get them to be thinking about one option or the other, that means they were already thinking about, pretty much in their mind, it's a matter of, yeah, I think I really want to buy this product. I don't know which way to go with it. In the dental office, the example was software. It was some dental office software, one package that was used, one part of it that was used for management of the office, keeping appointments and billing and those kinds of things. And the other one had to do with the software package that was hooked up to the X-ray equipment and kept records of dental records of the actual the X-rays. So the two choices there might be, and it might be three choices to the dentist. Which package would you like to have? You might make the recommendation. I think this office is really ready, from what you've said in our discussion today and what your office staff has said. I think you're really ready for the office management package. But then there's the dental X-ray package, and which of that? What do you think? Which of those would you want to go through first? Give them something to think about, some comparisons to make, getting them to know because if they're giving consideration to both of these and trying to decide whether it's both packages or just one or the other, that means they're thinking about the product, and that's what you want. That's what you want. There's a compliment or a vanity close. Pay a compliment that appeals to the prospect's sense of identity. Something like, one of the reasons I like calling on you is that your office is among the first to use some of the latest equipment, because I notice in your dental office you have much of the the state-of-the-art equipment that's used in the dental industry. Those kinds of things. Make sure they're legitimate and legitimate compliments. If somebody certainly deserves a compliment, go ahead and pay them a compliment and let them know that I see that your office likes state-of-the-art equipment. When I look around, the chairs and the other things that you have in your office, and wouldn't it be great that you can add in the state-of-the-art software to the other pieces of equipment that you and the other pieces of equipment that you have in your office. Finally, the combination close is when you've gained, you've been doing this business for a while and selling your product for a while. You can use two or more closing approaches to gain agreement. It's a matter of using the five basic ones that we talked about, and using pieces of those, putting them together that will meet that'll serve the needs of the customer. And that's the key. If by the time your presentation is over, if the customer feels that you are meeting their needs with your product or service, that's why you're here. That's why you came to make the sales presentation. That's a success. Even if they don't buy the product, which certainly you might say, well, that's it's just a total loss if they don't buy it. If you get them to the point where they understand that, and then what you need to understand, then there must be some other reason why they're not buying the product. But if you've been able to close and to gain agreement and go through this process that we've been discussing as a salesperson, you can feel good about that. Just make sure you keep the door open so that you can set a date for a revisit. Can I come back in a month if you've had a chance to think about it? Try to find out what the reluctance is to make the purchase. But it's possible that you could get agreement from the customer that your solution is the one. Unfortunately, they might say, unfortunately, I can't make the purchase at this time. You have actually, you've done well. So closing starts at the beginning. It's about helping a customer solve a problem. Think back to the early phase of the selling process when you're thinking about prospects and you're qualifying prospects. If you've done a thorough job of finding the customers, finding prospects who your product or service fits with. In other words, if these are customers, if you've identified a set of customers that who need your product or service, then you've done it right, and you have actually at that point, by doing that, by the better you can do, the better job you can do at identifying the people who can really use your product and who can pay for it and who can implement it successfully and use it properly. The better you do that part of your job, the closer you'll come to when you're doing the close. You will find that you will be closing the sale with a successful sale a good bit of the time, most of the time. And with that, I will end this conversation. And there is another set of slides coming up that will follow this one. So we'll see you on the next set of slides shortly.